5 years into marriage, my wife confessed my daughter wasn't mine. She thought the truth would end us. She didn't know it would awaken something darker, a revenge so cold and calculated, she'd never see it coming. Before continue, please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. I'm Daniel, 32 years old, and for 5 years, I thought I had the perfect life. A loving wife. A beautiful little girl who had my eyes. A small but cozy home. I thought I'd built something unbreakable. Something that would last forever. But forever is a lie. The day it all broke apart started like any other, sunlight bleeding through the curtains, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen, the sound of my daughter's laughter echoing down the hall. But by nightfall, that laughter would feel like a knife twisting inside me. There was no warning. No build-up. Just 5 words from my wife that burned into my mind like acid. She told me my daughter wasn't mine. 5 years of bedtime stories, birthday candles, and scraped knees. Erased with a single confession. It wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. In that moment, it felt like my chest collapsed inward. My ears rang. My hands trembled so hard I could barely keep them still. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The world narrowed to her face, expressionless, as if she had just told me the weather. The pain was sharp at first, like being stabbed. But then it became something else, slow, suffocating, and cold. A rage so deep it didn't explode. It sank into my bones, curling up inside me like something that had been waiting for years. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing beside me. My mind kept replaying the past, the day I first held my daughter in the hospital, the way her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, the way I swore to protect her forever. But now, even those memories felt stolen. Corrupted. Like someone had painted over my entire life with black ink. I thought about the man she had been with. I didn't know his name yet. But I knew one thing, he was breathing, and that wouldn't be the case forever. The house felt too small for the storm building inside me. By morning, I had decided something with an icy clarity that scared even me. There would be no screaming fight, no divorce papers, no begging for answers. There would be revenge. Not the kind you see in movies, quick and clean. No. Mine would be slow. Carefully planned. The kind of revenge that makes the other person wish they had never been born. Because when someone rips out your heart, you don't just want to hurt them back. You want to destroy everything they touch. I began watching her differently. Every movement, every glance at her phone, every time she went out, I noticed it all. She didn't realize it yet, but she had become prey, and I was learning her habits, her weaknesses, her patterns. In those first days after her confession, I didn't act out. I didn't raise my voice or change my behavior. I kept the mask on. I smiled. I played with my daughter. But inside, I was building something, a plan. The first step was information. If I was going to end her world, I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. I went through her messages while she showered, checked her bank statements, traced her late-night calls. The man's name surfaced soon enough, along with every disgusting detail of their affair. He wasn't just some stranger. He was someone from her past. Someone who had been lurking in the shadows all these years, waiting for his chance. And she gave it to him. Finding out about him didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Because by then, pain had turned into focus. Every time I looked at her, I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw a target. And the best part about targets? They never see it coming until it's too late. The morning after her confession, something in me had shifted forever. I wasn't Daniel, the husband anymore. I wasn't even Daniel, the father. I had become something else, a hunter wearing the skin of the man she used to know. To the outside world, nothing changed. We still had breakfast together. I still kissed my daughter goodnight. I still asked her about her day. But behind my eyes there was a notebook filling with details, a map of her life, every path, every secret. I started with her phone. I memorized her passcode, and every night after she fell asleep, I scrolled through her conversations, saving screenshots to a hidden folder on an encrypted drive. I learned how they talked, the names they used, the places they met. She had been clever, deleting messages, using private chats, but she wasn't careful enough. She had a routine, and routines are the death of liars. Every Thursday afternoon, she went to a yoga class that didn't exist. Every second Friday, she stayed late at work, but her office lights were dark by 6. And the man, his name was Caleb, was just as predictable. I followed her once, keeping my distance, moving through streets I knew like the veins in my hand. She met him at a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon and cracked pavement. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. The image of her walking into that room was enough to burn the last traces of love out of me. But I wasn't going to confront them. That would be mercy. No, I wanted her to live long enough to feel everything she had made me feel, multiplied by 10, maybe 20. So I wore the mask tighter. I bought her flowers. I planned weekend trips. I made her believe nothing had changed. The better she felt, the harder she would fall when I finally cut the ground from under her. In the background, I began building the machinery of her downfall. I started recording calls, hers, mine, Caleb's when I could get him to answer. I opened new bank accounts in my name only, slowly draining our joint savings without her noticing. I befriended people in her workplace, planting subtle rumors that would come back to her later like whispers in the dark. I became her shadow, close enough to feel her warmth, but always watching, always tightening the noose. The thing about revenge is that it feeds on patience. Every day I acted normal was another brick in the prison I was building for her. And when that prison was finished, I wasn't going to lock her inside. I was going to set it on fire. The thing about revenge is you don't just go for the throat right away. If you want it to stick, you start by making your target build their own prison, one mistake at a time. After I learned everything about her affair, where, when, how often, I didn't rush. Instead, I started to loosen the leash. I made myself busy more often. I came home later than usual. I told her I had extra work. I could feel her relaxing, thinking my distance meant I was still clueless. And the more she thought she was winning, the easier it was to let her dig her own grave. I left my car keys somewhere she could borrow them. I forgot a credit card in the kitchen drawer with a higher limit than the one she usually used. And I quietly adjusted my online banking alerts so that every time she swiped it, I knew exactly where she was. She didn't realize she was walking into a cage with no door. The first part of the trap was to make her believe she was untouchable. The second part was to make sure that when things started to fall apart, she wouldn't be able to figure out why. I began sowing little seeds of chaos in her life. I accidentally mentioned to one of her friends that she'd been stressed lately, nothing specific, just enough to spark gossip. I moved things in the house just slightly, so she'd feel unsettled but couldn't accuse me of anything. I changed the Wi-Fi password while she was out, then changed it back before she noticed, the kind of small disruption that makes you feel watched without knowing how. I wanted her paranoid, but not certain. That's the beauty of this stage, it's all in her head, yet it's completely real. And it was working. She'd look over her shoulder a little more when she walked into a room. She'd check her phone twice before unlocking it, even though she didn't know I already had everything I needed from it. Her smiles started feeling forced. Her texts to him started getting shorter. I didn't touch her directly yet, no confrontation, no threats, no shouting. That would have given her something to fight against. Instead, I let the silence wrap around her like a snake, tightening slowly so she didn't notice until it was too late. She thought she was living her double life without a scratch. She didn't know that the first cracks had already formed. And I was the one holding the hammer. The first cut had to be small. Too small for her to connect it to me, but deep enough for the sting to stay. I started with her comfort zones. The things she took for granted. She relied on being in control at work. Deadlines met. Emails answered. A reputation for being reliable. I made sure that reputation began to slip, not in a way that would get her fired, just in a way that made people raise their eyebrows. A file she needed went missing from her shared drive. It wasn't gone, of course. I'd simply moved it into a hidden folder I created under a random name, then moved it back 2 days later. By then, her boss had already noticed the delay. Next, I got in touch with a guy I knew in her industry, not a close friend, just someone who owed me a favor. I had him casually mention to one of her clients that she'd been distracted lately. Nothing concrete, just enough to plant a seed. Seeds grow fast when they're watered with doubt. At home, I made life just a little less smooth. Her favorite bottle of wine gone from the fridge. The laundry machine accidentally set to the wrong cycle, ruining her favorite sweater. A subscription service she loved suddenly declined payment. All tiny inconveniences. All just enough to irritate, never enough to accuse. And while she was juggling these little fires, I was still smiling. Still playing the role of the supportive husband. Still tucking my daughter into bed at night, reading her stories while my wife sat in the next room, slowly losing her grip on the perfect image she loved so much. The most satisfying part? She started blaming herself. She told her friends she was just tired lately. She told her boss she must have made a mistake. She told herself she just needed to get more organized. Meanwhile, I was standing in the shadows, quietly rearranging the pieces so that every step she took forward landed her 2 steps back. And I wasn't even close to finished. Because these were just paper cut. The deep wounds were still coming. By now, I had more than enough dirt to end her life in one blow. But that's not what I wanted. I didn't want her gone quickly. I wanted her to bleed out in every way possible, financially, socially, emotionally, until she had nothing left to hold on to. I started with the money. She had no idea that over the past few months, I'd been siphoning small amounts from our joint account into one she couldn't access. Just a few hundred here, a few hundred there, too small for her to notice, but steady enough that by now, the damage was significant. Then I went for her personal account. I knew every password she used, every security question she answered. It wasn't hard to set up automatic payments to bogus services I controlled, disguised under boring names like utility management fee or annual processing renewal. Her balance started dipping lower than she liked, but she didn't dare ask me for help. Pride's a funny thing, it keeps people silent even when they're drowning. Next came her little boyfriend, Caleb. I dug into his life the same way I had dug into hers. His job wasn't hard to find, and his boss wasn't hard to contact anonymously. I sent a concerned citizen email about how one of his employees had been seen multiple times, leaving a motel in the middle of the workday. Nothing that could be traced back to me, but enough to make Caleb's manager start asking questions. At the same time, I made sure their secret meetings became harder to arrange. Hotel reservations mysteriously got cancelled minutes before check-in. His car broke down when someone, me, loosened a few key bolts in his driveway late at night. Nothing dangerous. Not yet. Just expensive and inconvenient. Meanwhile, I tightened the noose socially. I accidentally let one of her closest friends see a blurred screenshot of her and Caleb walking together, arm in arm. I didn't show the full picture, just enough to make her friends start thinking, start whispering. And here's the thing about whispers, they spread faster than shouts. Soon, she was coming home with that look in her eyes, the one that says she knows something is wrong but can't figure out what. Her phone buzzed less. Her smile to Caleb in public was gone. She was starting to taste the isolation, and it was only the appetizer. I wasn't playing games anymore. From this point on, everything would hurt. It started with the event she had been talking about for weeks, a company dinner full of her colleagues, her boss, and people she desperately wanted to impress. The kind of night where she would dress to be seen, to be envied, to be remembered. I made sure it was remembered for all the wrong reasons. 3 days before the dinner, I quietly sent an anonymous package to her boss. Inside were printed screenshots, carefully selected, not too explicit, but undeniable. A shot of her entering the motel with Caleb. Another of her coming out, hair messy, clothes slightly wrinkled. No names. No accusations. Just the pictures. I knew her boss wouldn't confront her outright, people in positions like his never do. They just start watching. And that's exactly what I wanted. On the night of the dinner, I watched her leave the house in a black dress she had bought for the occasion. She thought she looked untouchable. But halfway through the evening, things started to unravel. The wine glass in her hand suddenly slipped, shattering on the floor, soaking her dress in deep red. Nobody saw the small, deliberate nudge I gave from behind as I passed through the crowd. It wasn't enough to hurt her, just enough to embarrass her in front of everyone she wanted to impress. She went pale. I could see it from across the room. By the time she got home, she was shaking. She didn't know about the package I had sent. She didn't know her boss had spent the entire dinner watching her with quiet suspicion. She just felt the humiliation, the way eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. That night, I took things further. While she slept, I took her phone from her nightstand and sent Caleb a series of messages, carefully written to sound like her. Messages that hinted she might be getting tired of him. Then I deleted them from her phone, but not from his. The next day, Caleb ignored her calls. By that afternoon, she was pacing the kitchen like a trapped animal. That night, I let her see me standing at the end of the hallway, just watching her for a moment before walking away without a word. No anger. No conversation. Just the reminder that I was there. She didn't sleep much after that. And that was the point. Because tired people make mistakes. And I was counting on her to make the biggest one yet. Caleb's silence stretched into days. Her texts to him got more desperate, her tone more frantic. When he finally answered, it was cold. Short. Almost resentful. I knew why. The messages I had sent from her phone were still playing in his head, poisoning the way he saw her. I decided it was time to start crushing them both at the same time. One morning, she left her laptop on the kitchen counter while she got my daughter ready for school. I slipped a USB drive into it and copied her entire email history. Then I planted something inside, a single email chain between her and Caleb, one I had carefully forged, full of petty insults about her boss and co-workers. That email didn't stay hidden for long. 2 days later, her boss called her in for a discussion. She came home pale and tight-lipped, muttering something about misunderstandings and jealousy in the office. She didn't know that jealousy had a name, and it was mine. Meanwhile, Caleb was dealing with his own bad luck. His car was vandalized one night, not destroyed, just scratched up with deep, ugly marks. Enough to cost him money and make him wonder who hated him enough to do it. On the same week, a fake social media account tagged his employer in a post accusing him of stealing from company fund. He panicked. I watched from the sidelines, sipping my coffee, as he scrambled to convince his boss it wasn't true. At home, she started looking at me differently. Longer stares, sharper eyes. I could almost hear the thought forming in her head, could he know? So I gave her a reason to think so. One night, I placed a single printed photo on her pillow while she was in the shower, a photo of her and Caleb leaving the motel together. I didn't say a word. When she came into the bedroom, she froze. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, tying my shoes, not even looking at her. I stood up, walked past her, and left the room. No explanation. No confrontation. Just the photo. The paranoia set in fast. She started checking the locks twice before bed. She kept her phone on her at all times, even in the bathroom. She jumped whenever the doorbell rang. She knew. She didn't know how much I knew. And that made her even more afraid. Because fear grows in the gaps between what you know and what you can prove. Caleb was the first to crack. One rainy Thursday, I watched from my car as he stood outside the motel, waiting. She never showed. She couldn't. Her boss had scheduled a last-minute meeting, after a sudden error in her reports, an error I had planted myself. When Caleb finally gave up and left, I followed him. Not too close, just enough to watch his routine. He stopped at a late-night store. Bought a drink. Headed home. I pulled into his driveway 10 minutes after his lights went off. The rain covered my footsteps, the hood of my jacket shadowed my face. I pulled out the tire iron I'd been keeping under the seat for weeks. This wasn't about killing him, not yet. It was about sending a message. I shattered his headlights first. Then the windshield. Then the driver's side mirror. The sound was deafening in the night, but the rain swallowed most of it. When I left, the car looked like it had been through a riot. He'd know it wasn't random. He just wouldn't know who. 2 days later, I made sure she felt it too. She came home late, smelling faintly of his cologne even though their relationship was hanging by a thread. I was waiting in the living room. No words. Just the same printed photo from before, but this time, it was torn in half. Her face on one side. His on the other. She went pale. I stood, walked past her, and as I did, I let my shoulder slam hard into hers. Not enough to injure, but enough to show her I could. That night, she barely slept. I could hear her pacing in the kitchen, opening and closing drawers. She locked the bedroom door when she finally went to bed. I waited until just before dawn, then unlocked it with the spare key she forgot I had. I stood at the foot of the bed for just a few seconds. Long enough for her to stir, for her eyes to open and see my silhouette in the dark. I left without a word. From that moment, the fear never left her. And fear makes people sloppy. She started missing deadlines at work. She stopped going to the gym. She even stopped meeting Caleb, whether out of fear or because he was done with her, I didn't care. Her world was shrinking, one quiet act at a time. And I was going to make it collapse completely. By now, she was a shadow of the woman who once strutted through life like nothing could touch her. Her friends kept their distance. Caleb was gone. Her boss no longer trusted her. She barely spoke to me unless she had to, and when she did, her voice was tight, like each word might snap. I had stripped away almost everything. Almost. There was one last thing she still had, her reputation outside of work. She loved being the perfect wife in the eyes of our neighbors, the woman with a polite smile and well-kept house. So I made sure that mask shattered in public. I started by sending anonymous messages to a few neighborhood group chat. They were vague at first, little warnings, that someone in the area was having an affair, meeting a man at a local motel. No names, just enough to spark curiosity. Then I left a single manila envelope on the porch of the woman who ran every community event. Inside, printed photos of my wife and Caleb. Not the worst ones. Not yet. But damning enough. The next weekend, at a neighborhood gathering, I watched it happen. The whispers. The sidelong glances. The way people stopped including her in conversations. She knew. And worse, she knew there was no way to undo it. That same week, I hit her financially in a way she couldn't ignore. I drained the rest of our joint savings, every last cent, and moved it into an account she couldn't touch. Then I canceled her credit cards, claiming they were compromised. When she tried to buy groceries that night, her card was declined. She came home empty-handed. Our daughter was in the living room watching TV. I walked past her and into the kitchen, dropped a bag of groceries I'd bought myself on the counter, and kept walking without looking at her. That night, I set the stage for the final humiliation. I created a fake profile pretending to be Caleb and posted every photo, every screenshot, every trace of their affair onto a public forum, tagging her work, her friends, her family. By morning, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, messages, missed notifications. She didn't go to work that day. She didn't even try. She sat at the kitchen table, pale and silent, staring at nothing. And I knew. I had taken everything. There was nothing left to break. The morning after her public exposure, the house felt different. Quieter. Not the peaceful quiet of a happy home, the heavy quiet of a place that had stopped breathing. She barely moved from the kitchen table. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red and swollen. The phone sat in front of her, face down, buzzing every few minutes with another call or message she refused to answer. She looked like someone who had been hollowed out from the inside. I made coffee for myself. Not for her. I didn't ask if she wanted any. I didn't even acknowledge she was there. By noon, I had packed a single bag. Not because I had to leave, the house was still mine, but because I wanted her to feel the emptiness the second I stepped out that door. Before I left, I walked over to the table and placed a single folded piece of paper in front of her. Inside was everything: bank account records showing the drained funds, the screenshots of her and Caleb, the fake messages I'd sent from her phone, the proof that every bad turn in her life over the past months had been me. No threats, no demands. Just the truth, laid bare like a corpse. I leaned down, close enough for her to hear me breathe, and whispered the only thing I had left to say. She had taken my life from me once. Now I had taken hers forever. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Her face, pale, broken, and trembling, was already burned into my memory. In the days that followed, I heard bits and pieces. She quit her job. Caleb moved to another city. Most of her friends cut contact completely. The house eventually went up for sale, the "for sale" sign leaning slightly in the wind like it didn't even want to be there. I kept my distance. I didn't need to see her to know the damage was permanent. And as for my daughter, the one she swore wasn't mine, I made sure she was taken care of in ways her mother never could. Because while my wife's life had burned to ash, I had built something new. In the end, revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic fight or a single moment of triumph. It was the slow, methodical dismantling of everything she was. And when it was over, I walked away with the only thing I really wanted: my power back. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.